Jambo Radio.
Welcome to BB's African News Magazine show on Jambo Radio, the show that focuses on all things positive coming from the Scottish African Diaspora and the African continent at large. We're reporting from here on all things Africa related before, during, and after the current COVID-19 crisis. I'm Benny Briggs-McKinley, BB, and as always, I will be your host. Well, today on the show, we have a very special treat for you, my dear listeners, and that's because we have a very special guest on the show today. He is Miles Greenwood, and he is the curator of Legacies of Slavery and Empire at the Glasgow Museums. Miles has an MA in Heritage Studies and is an expert on the role of Pan-Africanism in the decolonization of the British Empire. In his present role, he plans and coordinates Glasgow Museum's approach to addressing the legacies of transatlantic slavery and the British Empire. What a massive remit. I can't even wait to get started on this. Miles is originally from Manchester, but I believe and hope he'll be with us here in Scotland for a long, long time. Today, though, we're going to get to know the man, his work, and his goals for this huge task that has been set before him. I know and by the way, he just happens to be very, very cool. We probably find that out on another show. As always, listeners, if you want to join us, you can, contact us on WhatsApp, send a message, 0745 9906822. That's 0745990682. And if you're on social media, just combine the words Jambo Radio or Scotland, and you will find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Jambo Radio Scotland. You can't miss us. And download the Jambo Radio app if you want to do that, or just ask your smart speaker to play Jambo Radio. Just say Siri, Alexa, Google, play Jambo Radio, and off you go. So send us your comments, your opinions, everything, and we would love to hear from you. In the meantime, let us welcome the man of the hour, and that is Miles. Welcome to the show, Miles. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here.
Good morning. Everybody has been so excited to have you on. The studio has been buzzing because we know a really, really, really important person is going to be on today. So could you please introduce yourself to the listeners, just a little bit of your bio, your background. We'll talk about the road to the role in a few minutes, but just a little bit about your background and your bio.
Yeah, I don't know how much I can add to what you've already said, but yeah, my name's Miles. I grew up in Manchester, and I've always loved history, always loved music, and yeah, it's sort of taken me, I suppose, to where I am now, one way or another. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I'm sure
that's a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to dig a bit deeper. So Can you tell us a little bit about the road to the role? So right now, you're curator of Legacies of Slavery and the British Empire at Glasgow Museums. That's massive. So tell us a bit of how you got from growing up in Manchester to coming to Glasgow and being that. And you can do that in 50 seconds. I'm joking. Take your time.
I'll do my best. I suppose it starts really the fact that I just used to always really, really love history. And I know it's not such a usual thing, I suppose, a young black male to really be interested in, but it's always really fascinating, histories of all kinds.
Amazing.
But I suppose I didn't used to always like it at school, which is a bit of an irony, but I was always sort of interested in reading different elements of history, reading black history. So I kind of took that with me to college, to university. And then when I finished university, I was really keen to sort of stay in the realm of history. So I kind of chose museums as a way to further that interest and share my interest, particularly in black history, in the museum sector. And that's kind of led me to where I am now.
Okay. And what is a curator? We know, layman's terms, a curator is someone who puts things together and arranges the displays and collections in a museum. That's super, super lay. But for other listeners, what exactly is a curator in general? We'll talk about the particular role you're doing as a curator, but what is a curator in general?
That is probably the most difficult question you could ask. I suppose you could ask every single curator what their role and remit means to them, and everyone would say something different. To me, I suppose it's about connecting history with what I think people need to know about the past for the present. And within the realm of museums, how we can use objects to do that.
So as a curator of Legacies of Slavery, what does that mean? What are you doing every day? What's your day to day? What are you doing every day?
In my day to day, it's kind of some of the stuff that you would expect, which is researching collections and looking at new ways we can talk about them to better bring about these histories, to talk about transatlantic slavery and British imperialism, but perhaps in ways that it hasn't been spoken about before. From my perspective, I'm particularly interested in telling stories from the perspectives of enslaved and colonized people, rather than just focusing on history through white people. Even I think it's important to talk about when white people were involved in transatlantic slavery and were involved in British imperialism. But I just don't think it's the only way that we should be talking about these histories. So a lot of it is kind of, looking at collections and thinking about how we can bring out that side of the story a bit more.
Right. And I heard you use the term enslaved people. I use that term as well. I never say slaves because, nobody was born a slave. People were enslaved.
Absolutely.
So did you do that on purpose, or is that the way you think, or was that just something you said?
No, I think it's exactly the same as you. It's making a conscious decision to do that and to recognize that these were people who were enslaved. It wasn't, as you said, it wasn't their identity. And I think it is really important to emphasize that in our language, but also in the way that we talk about these histories. Because I think sometimes in society, a lot of Black history can become synonymous with slavery. And then when we think about Black people in the past, we think about them as slaves. Whereas I think by putting the active word on it and saying that they were enslaved, it re-emphasizes the fact that, that these are people that we're talking about.
Yes, that's exactly how I feel. Exactly. I never use that word. I always put the enslaved term on it when I'm talking about it. So what have you learned on your journey? I know you still have a long way to go, but what have you learned so far on this journey of curating all these legacies,
I think one of the things that I'm always learning is the different ways that people see these histories.
Okay.
So, for example, transatlantic slavery will mean different things to different people depending on where you're from, what your background is, what your cultural heritage is. And the same goes for the British Empire. I mean, one of the things about the British Empire is that it did cover about a quarter of the world's surface. So people, depending on where you're from, what your gender is, what your class is, what your age is, will have different perceptions on what that empire means today. So it's always a sort of learning curve, and trying to think about ways that we can reflect those different perspectives is definitely a challenge, but I suppose it's something is quite exciting, because I suppose it re-emphasizes that human beings are pretty complicated and we don't all agree on anything. And sort of the importance of recognize that even people within the same ethnic group aren't going to have the same opinion on history. So we need to sort of try and think about ways that we can reflect that.
I think it's also, if it's coming from a good place, and it's a good thing, because you hear some bad faith arguments sometimes about, for example, like the contribution of Black soldiers during World War I and how they were celebrated and feted after the fact, and even World War II. And then you would think normally people would be like, oh yeah, that's not right. But there's a small faction that actually say things like, oh no, but they didn't contribute anything, and we're exaggerating things, and how many were there anyway? Did you run across things like that? Bad faith arguments about contributions, or even slavery itself, or the experience itself of empire and colonization?
Yeah, of course you do. To be honest, I've actually been surprised at how few people have came up with those arguments so far. But I think it's something that you're always going to come up against. And for me, I'm not interested in reflecting those opinions, because they're not based on the truth. We know the contributions of Black and Asian and Indigenous soldiers from across the empire to World War I, and we know that that's a fact of the history. I mean, it's called World War for a reason. It was a war that impacted everywhere across the globe. So, I think we're in the business of telling the truth, and also recognizing that people have different truths to tell on the same histories. But I think sometimes you just have to debunk falsehoods, because it's important that we sort of...
Sorry, Miles. Sorry, I just find it interesting how people can even convince themselves that, this was what is true, what is truth, what's your truth, this is the truth, you know what I mean? And people go, oh yeah, this didn't happen and that didn't happen. I thought people would be in a point where people will be, you know what, this happened, we're really sorry about it, everybody, and then, how are we going to move forward, rather than have people who are actively, even upset about the fact that you dare say, Black people contributed to anything, or slavery was a difficult time. Well, that's a very light term to use, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a difficult thing to unpick. I mean, my own opinion, and I'd be happy to hear other people's opinions, is that the reason for this is that Britain's been able to build this sort of comfortable history about itself over centuries, partly because all its atrocities happened over there, so could be ignored. It didn't happen like on their own doorstep. They didn't have to necessarily confront it in the same way that other nations have had to confront their past. And I think it's only been over the last, probably since, I'd say 1950s, 60s onwards, that people have slowly begun to really challenge these. And I think it's now come to a point where it's much more common to hear these narratives being challenged. And I think with that, because this history is so built in, as being so comfortable and being such like a source of pride, even if it's built on falsehoods, when that is challenged, I think it's you get quite a lot of pushback. But it's the truth, and I think it's better to build national stories based on the truth rather than on falsehoods and uncomfortable lies.
Yeah, I mean, speaking about the history and the way the British version of things are, this is my opinion and what I grew up believing, but I thought they were softer when it came to colonization. The British, the colonies had it easier, because I think we've talked about this in the past, you and I. My parents, growing up, I just realized recently that yes, they did grow up, before the independence. That means they grew up in, a colonized Nigeria. But for me, my dad never talked about anything like, there were some random white officers and governors and all that, but it had nothing to do with his day to day, if you know what I mean. He went to school, the chiefs were in charge in the village, everybody was Black, and all the powerful guys that mattered to him were all his, village chiefs and all that. And my mother, the same, she went to school in the west of Nigeria. Never talked about anything to do with colonization or anything like that. So I just thought, it was fine. And then you hear, the Germans, how tough they were in parts of Africa. And then the Belgians were just nuts in Congo. And then the French just had atrocities in Ivory Coast and, Cameroon and all of that. And you think, oh my God, am I right? Were the British softer during colonization? Or have I got like a more romanticized version of history? Or, what do you think? Do you think there are different approaches? And do you think the British were softer during colonization in Africa?
It's a really hard question to answer. I think that these European empires definitely were interrelated, and some of the violent institutions, such as concentration camps, were pioneered by the British and then used by other European empires in more fatal ways. But it's definitely true that the British Empire changed over times, and in different places it behaved in different ways, and towards different people it behaved in different ways as well. So some people say, for example, like the Mau Mau would say that the British Empire to them was the worst of all empires because it impacted them in the most sort of violent circumstances, whereas other people might feel that their lives didn't change much. And for many people, in the grand scheme of things, where you have incredibly long history of settled societies that have developed, the British Empire, I suppose, was a small punctuation in their history. And I think that's something that's important to recognise, that whilst the British Empire is so fundamental to British history, to a lot of other people's it's just one part.
One thing.
And to some people it was an incredibly fatal, negative, violent part, and to others it was less so, and it had less of an impact. But yeah, it's definitely complicated. I don't always try to compare it directly with the European empires, but I think it's useful to think about how these empires sort of related to each other.
Right. And when we talk about those relation differences as well, we're talking about, like, we will have the conversation of restitution that's been happening recently. And I know we had Neil Curtis on the show, and how the Brinian bronzes are going back. And we talked about how horribly violently they were taken in the first place and why it's only right to give them back. But we also talked about the fact that Germany is like doing theirs in a very open way. And they sent a German delegation to Benin itself to meet the chiefs and the governors there and to say, oh, we're really sorry. And then they're funding, they're part funding the build of a massive modern museum that all the bronzes they are returning are going to go to. And the French also having conversations. The president, I don't know if he's paying eye service or not, or lip service or not, sorry, is saying, oh, we have to take them back. There's so much of African loot in France. We have to give it back and all of that. And it's very open conversations. In fact, the Germans are really super sorry, quote unquote. And they're really doing a lot to say, look, we're giving this back and, blah, blah, blah. And then on the British side, it's like really slower and, less open. And a lot of the bigger museums actually are like, no, we're not giving them back. And it seems like the conversation is different and the approach is different. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Germany seems to be sort of blazing a trail in terms of restitution and also reparations as well to some extent. I mean, I'm not myself a massive fan of like the whole fanfare around it. I think I don't want to guess at the Germans' motivations, but when it comes to British institutions doing it, I'd like them to be doing it because it's the right thing to do rather than because it looks good for them. And that's not me sort of saying anything about any individual institutions. I think it's just a way that I hope that British institutions will move forward with it. So yeah, I'm not too bothered about seeing British institutions making statements about it. I'd just rather see more of them doing it, if that makes sense.
But why do you think the conversation is so hard? I'm sorry, we're going to move on very quickly soon. Why do you think it's such a hard conversation here in Britain about this? Why is it so much more complicated? I know you say you don't like the fanfare of the way the Germans are doing their version of it, but it's almost like here it's really like a hard conversation to even start. It started, but for a very, very long time. Like I remember, I don't remember, I was born, but in 1977 they had a festival. I don't know if you've heard about Festac festival. It's massive. The Nigerian government wanted to show they had money, they had funds, they handed a Pan-African festival. So it was called Festival, the Festival of Arts and Culture. It was huge and all the African countries were invited to come dance and sing and bring their troops and huge arts. I think it lasted about a week or 2 weeks. Massive thing. And I know at that time the Nigerian government wanted to borrow, if you can imagine that, some of the Benin bronzes so they could display them during the festival. And they were not allowed to do it. They said no, they weren't allowed to borrow them or even get them back. So it seems like this conversation has been really tight with the British government and British museums for a very long time. Yes, it's opening up a bit, but it just seems harder in the UK than other parts of Europe. Do you think that's correct?
No, I think so. I think it's partly linked to what we were saying before about how Britain has become very comfortable with its version of its own history.
Yes.
So I don't think it's at a point of recognizing that the British Empire was a violent phenomenon. So I think that is an absolute baseline recognition before people begin to then talk about restitution. So I think Germany is very good at talking about their own colonial past and recognizing at times how they have been complicit in violence. And I think that stems from the aftermath of the Holocaust and having to rebuild the nation based on truth and reconciliation.
Yes.
Whereas Britain hasn't had to ever go through that process. And it's still sort of playing out in the way that our government talks about these issues, the way that our museums talk about these issues, universities. And I think it's throughout society. So I 100% agree. I think it's much harder to sort of move forward with this until we have a proper, honest discussion at a national level about our own involvement in these histories.
Yeah, I mean, for better or worse, countries who do that have those reconciliatory, commissions and processes seem to do better with reconciling the nation as one. Germany did it. I know South Africa, after apartheid ended, had a proper, we're sorry we did this, we're sorry, we're really sorry, let's start again, and I think that helped. Yes, they have flare-ups of craziness from time to time, but that's another story. But I think having that, that actual confession by the oppressor saying we did do this, it did happen, we're sorry about it, and let's go forward. How do we do that? America hasn't had anything like that, and Britain hasn't had anything, and I think that's why the social problems continue over and over and over and over again. All right. Anyway, moving on. So do you think you're supported in your work? Do you feel supported by the proper necessary bodies and people who oversee your work? Do you think they're doing all the right things for you to support you?
I think I feel very supported by my colleagues. I think they have, I think they're very committed to this work. And I think believe in it and believe in why we're doing it and recognize that it's important work to do. I think as an organization, I think it's taking a bit of a shift. I suppose museums are as well part of what the British Empire was. They grew out of the British Empire, and I suppose unpicking that and recognizing our own responsibility and role will take time. This is like 200 years, I suppose, that these ideologies have been built into the museum. And it doesn't help that there's not much funding available generally for the museum, so even less so for my work. But hopefully that will come and we'll be able to do some good work.
Okay. And what do you think can be done? I know a lot of minorities are not really involved in the museum sector, the heritage sector, and all of that. And we're trying to change that. But what do you think can be done from what you've learned or what you experienced and what you've done in your work to encourage more minorities to not just come to visit museums and all that, but to also actually join the heritage sector and the museum sector in career-wise, volunteering and all of that?
I think a lot needs to be done by museums themselves. I think they have to confront their own racist legacies and their own involvement in empire and spreading these ideologies. And that involves also thinking about how we might be talking about these issues in the space. Because ultimately, I think when people go to the museum, no matter what background you're from, you should feel that your story is represented and your truth is being spoken in that space. Yeah. And I don't think many museums are doing that at present. So I think there's a lot of emphasis on museums beginning to do that. So if people feel that, this is a place where my voice is being heard and where I could potentially work or I could volunteer. So I think, I think my feeling is that, the burden should be on museums to begin to address this rather than on the communities themselves.
Right. And don't you think sometimes address, because what is the end game? What do you want for the end when you finish your collections and unpick everything? Because I know there are museums in Belgium, for example, that focus on colonization in the Congo, and it's really a rough visit. If you visit it, it's really, really rough because they've laid out there really bare. They show the photos, they show, they have collections of all the atrocities and their role and what happened with the natives and all of that. And apparently when you finish visiting some of these museums in Belgium, you actually have a visceral reaction and very strange feeling. Do you think that's going to be a result of your work as well, or do you think what is the end game for your work?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing necessarily specific in mind that we're working towards at the moment, but I understand what you're saying, and I feel like, from my own perspective, my own opinion is that we shouldn't shy away from the hard truths, and even if sometimes that is difficult for people to see and hear, but at the same time, I'm quite keen that I don't want Black people whose heritage that we are talking about here to go away from whatever I've worked on feeling traumatized or downcast by what they've seen. I think from my own perspective, when it comes to the history of particularly transatlantic slavery, I don't think Black people have anything to be ashamed of. I think that we have an incredible tradition of resistance to enslavement from Africa to the Caribbean, on the ships themselves and afterwards in the aftermath. I think we should be proud of the fact that we survived the whole thing. And also that people across the diaspora have this incredible sense of kinship and connection. And
it's crazy.
Have continued throughout, despite all the attempts to eradicate them. So for me, I really want that to come out. And I want, for me, ideally, any Black people who come into contact with it to feel some sense of pride and sense that, there's more to this history than perhaps schools or movies about abolition tell us.
Yeah, of course, there's so much more. I mean, I like the way the American African American Museum of African American History in Washington. Apparently, how they do it. I haven't been there yet. I want to go. But the basement floor, you start from the basement, and that's really all the tough stuff about slavery and transatlantic, middle passage, and all of that horrible stuff. And then by then you go floor by floor by floor, different contributions and by blacks to science and music and then by the time you get to the top floor, apparently it's all about Jay-Z and Oprah and Beyonce and Michael Jackson and how they, how great all the achievements and Barack Obama and speeches and all that. So you kind of you start out really feeling really horrible. And then by the time you go through the stages, you feel, oh, wow, we're amazing, So I think maybe something like that. You could finish up with something like that, something really amazing, about Black history.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's important. It's about getting that full picture and recognizing that, there's a lot more to transatlantic slavery than what's traditionally presented. Yes. And also there's a lot more to Black history than transatlantic slavery. So if we can even do a bit of that, then I'll be pretty happy by the end of it.
Yeah. I mean, we learning history in school, because growing up in an African country is so different from as a Black person. You're just one Black person among many Black people. So you don't see it. You just do your history, you move on. You're surrounded by Black people and Black history all the time, contemporary and past, and traditions and culture. So that kind of grounds you. But growing up as a minority in another society, you really do need these things, And also, you need not to be misinformed as well about your past, because we slavery in our history classes and Slavic social studies classes was just one. It was one subject, one type, one topic. We did it. We moved on, and we had other things to work on. It wasn't our identity or anything like that. So I think that's an advantage you have if you grew up in an actual African society, as opposed to being a minority in another society and then having to create that image for the generations going forward. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree that education has to be shaped to the needs and context of the people within that society. So I suppose the question here is, within Scotland, what do young Scottish people growing up need to know about themselves and the world?
Exactly.
I think because of Scotland's involvement in the empire and in transatlantic slavery, that is a key part.
Yeah.
But then we also need to recognise that Scotland is increasingly a much more diverse society than it has been in the past. So we also need to reflect the histories, heritages and worldviews of all the people who are growing up now in Scotland.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. So you like history. So what's your favourite part of history? Favorite historical discovery, historical story, historical fact, era, anything like that. What's your favorite part of history?
Oh, that's a really tough question. I mean, one of my issues is that I'm really bad at actually specializing in any one element of history. But if I had to pick one part, it would probably be the Haitian Revolution.
I'm doing that today on the show. Oh my God. The aftermath. Oh my God. I have to do it in two parts because the aftermath is a completely different story as well, apart from the revolution. Oh my God. That's incredible you said that. Yeah, they did that. I don't want to say too much because I'm going to go deep into it later, but yes.
Yeah, I won't say too much, but just from my perspective, I think it's such an important part of global history.
Yes.
Is, and it's so interesting. So yes, I'm glad you're speaking about it. I'll definitely tune in and see what you said.
Oh yes. Okay, so that's good. I like all of it. I think I like all, but I always favor, the rebellions. All the rebellions that happened, because we never talk about that. We know Nat Turner and that's it. Everybody knows Nat Turner and that's it. But there were so many rebellions all over and the Caribbean were, oh my God, they actually had enclaves of kingdoms themselves. After they would leave the plantation, they'll create their own kingdom, have an African king, and some of those kingdoms exist till today. In all over the Caribbean, all over South America. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like in Jamaica, there's a town called Nanny Town after Queen Nanny of the Maroons, who was an Ashanti queen who rebelled against the British and caused a lot of trouble. But she established essentially a semi-independent kingdom for herself. out
And I
with
think the Spaniards, after
the
fighting a lot,
translation
they'll just
system.
let them be because they were tired. They, just
Mm.
go, yeah, do your thing. We're not chasing you. We're tired. You guys are crazy. But I also like the fact that 400, you're talking about kinship with Black people all over the world in diaspora. And the fact that 400 years later, I bring this up all the time, we share so many traits,
Mhm.
amongst, even though I've never lived in America long. I've visited, never lived there. I've never, but there's so many similarities in expression. It might be an American expression, but we have the counterpart in like local African parlance, Nigerian slang. There'll be a very similar connection in the Caribbean as well. The certain
Mhm.
ways we pronounce words just generally that we all pronounce them and we just can't pronounce certain words or mispronounce them and we do them, or the fact that in Brazil you go and you see people who are almost white, so light skinned, presenting as white, and then they start dancing and they're dancing like in African dance, and they're, the beat, the music, you can hear the Yoruba in there 400 years
Mm.
later, and things like that just
Yeah.
fascinate me. Do you think the same?
Yeah, I think absolutely. It transcends into so much stuff. I mean, like religious practices, even when we're talking about Christianity, is so
Mm-hmm.
influenced by traditional African cultures and
Mm-hmm.
traditional African religions
Mm-hmm.
that are sort of fused with it. And that sort of transcends from Africa to the Caribbean. Foodstuffs as well,
Mm-hmm.
like different
Mm-hmm.
ways of preparing food, the type of foods
Mm-hmm.
that we eat, as you say, music. Yeah, there's so much. There's like such a deep connection. I remember in Nelson Mandela's autobiography, he talks about it as the unbroken umbilical cord
It
that
is.
connects us.
It
And I
is.
always think about it in that way.
It
It's
is.
because it's very much the way that I see it, I think.
It is. Things we don't even teach each other. For example, carrying a basket on the head. Like you walk down in
Mm.
Jamaica in the market and you see women, you know, with a basket on the head. Like that's literally Africa. But they've never been to Africa. They will tell you they're not African. They will tell you they have nothing to do
Yeah.
with Africa. Where you look at them, you're like, are you sure? my si-
Yeah.
my sister said she went to the Bahamas, right? And she was having goosebumps because she went into the market. She didn't just stay in the resort. She went to the market, the local market. I said she was seeing African people all over but she could tell their names, their tribes from their faces.
Mhm.
And I said she was, but they weren't they had the, Bayesian accent, the Bahamian accent. They didn't but she could tell your ancestors were from here, from here. She could see it. And it was so weird. It was such a strange experience for her. Things like that are just crazy that 400,
Yeah.
500 years later, we all carry this trait. It's mental.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I think it's like it should be such a source of pride as well
It
for us.
should be. Yes. Yes, you're right. So now the quick questions are coming. The real, don't think about it too much. I did this with Serena last weekend. She was ready. She was ready. So let's go. Highlight of your career so far.
Getting this job.
Okay. Number 2, biggest challenge of a career so far.
Working in this job.
Okay. Take that, listeners, take from that what you will. All right. So, what do you think people who came before us will think of your work, of the work that's being done? The kind of work you're doing, the restitution movement, all the conversations being had. What do you think people who came before us will think about it?
I hope they'll feel pride, and I hope once it's done that they'll feel a sense of justice to some of the things that they've experienced.
Yes, and that they didn't suffer in vain. Okay, and next one. What are your 2 biggest passions?
Music and my family.
Okay, that's very, very good. And are you going to stay in Scotland forever? Yay.
I can't say forever, but I'll definitely be there for the next few years anyway.
All right. All right, we'll hold you to that. Don't leave. Scotland's kind of place. People say they're coming for 5 years or 2 years or 3 years, and 20 years later, they're like, I'm still here.
I mean, I've already been here for 3 years now, so
All right, so you have
kept me this
17
long.
more to go.
Yeah.
All right. So, and finally, what are 2 things? Oh, before that, Landry's going to play you a song. Do you like Afrobeat music? Do you know any Afrobeat music?
I'm not like it's not my number one genre. I mean, I love Burna Boy, of course. Like,
All right. He's going to play a Burna Boy song later
okay,
on.
amazing.
So just he's going to have that on soundtrack. But I was going to say, what are two things about you that people who know you may not know about you, or may be surprised to learn about you?
You say two things.
Yeah.
Oh God, I don't even know if I can think of one to be surprised to learn about me.
Or that you can do, or you know, or anything about you.
I mean, one thing is that people often associate me sort of like history and heritage, but I actually really like writing creative fiction, so that might be a surprise. What else would people be surprised about?
Can you play the bongos? Can you play the violin?
What can I? I'm terrible at music. That's one thing, I suppose. My parents named me after Miles Davis, and they had high hopes for me being a musician, but I failed at every single instrument that they put in front of me.
So, you have the name, so that's fine.
I have the
name. Okay, so you're gonna skip the second one, are you?
I'll go for the name as the second one.
Okay. Wow, you're named after Miles Davis, people. That is really, really cool. That's bragging rights. And finally, what advice would you have for the listeners listening? So those young people who are trying to start their careers, or who are thinking of going to the heritage sector, the museum sector, or any sector at all, who are thinking about starting out and need some advice, and the listeners in general, based on what you're doing or what you experience, what advice would you have for them?
I mean, I'm always a bit uncomfortable about giving advice because I suppose I'm still figuring out most stuff myself. But I suppose the number one thing is to try and sort of stay true to the things that you really believe in, like the changes that you want to see in the world. So no matter what you decide to do, no matter what career you decide to pursue or what you're doing in life, that's a sort of driving force behind it.
Okay, so stay true to yourself. Okay, and is there any way if people want to come to the museum or to link with you to see what you're doing, or kind of work you're doing and checking on you from time to time? Is there any way they can reach you? Is it through the museum website, or do you have a private, not private, but another way of reaching you?
Yeah, you can reach through Glasgow Museums, have a contact page, or you can get me on Twitter. I've got a public profile, so my handle's at Miles_AG, and I'm easy to reach through that as well. Okay.
So Miles_AG. I was looking for you this weekend. I couldn't find you. So it's AG, it's not Greenwood, because there's so many Miles Greenwoods on Twitter and LinkedIn. I was like, where is he? Where is he? So now I know. Okay. And that's it. That was painless, wasn't it, Miles?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that was great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I know Manu's going to get in touch because he wants you to come on the show and talk about all your music knowledge on his show. Sorry. And talk about all your music knowledge, and you guys just spent an hour together, just doing music together. So I'm sure you're going to be back on Jambo Radio. So I'll be listening to that one, not hosting that one.
That sounds great. And I'm looking forward to listening to you talk about Haiti later.
Oh yes, just wait 1 hour, 1.5 hours. I'll be there. Okay, so have a wonderful day, Miles. Thank you so much for being on the show. Do not be a stranger. If there's anything else you want to talk about, anything else comes up in your work, and you want to come talk about it, you're welcome anytime. And we're here. We're going to be here forever. So just, let us know, and we'll have you on the show again. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you.
I'll be in touch. Okay, you take care.
Bye. All right, guys, that was Miles Greenwood. He's the curator of Legacies of Slavery and Empire at Glasgow Museums. We thank you for talking with us and wish him only the best in all his projects. He has such a massive remit, of the work he's meant to do. But in the meantime, to help him along his way and to honor him for being on the show, he mentioned Burna Boy, so we're going to play the song Different, and that's by Burna Boy featuring Angela Kidjo and Damon Marley. Enjoy. Welcome back. We are back. That was Miles Greenwood, curator of Legacy of Slavery at Glasgow Museums. It was a wonderful conversation, and we cannot wait to have him back on the show. If you guys want to check him out, check out Glasgow Museums, please go to the website and you will see the contact page there, and also see a section for what he's doing, Legacies of Slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. It's such an important job he's doing, and we wish him all all the best in his work. Okay, guys, let's do some quick news, and then we'll have a song, and then we're going to come back to a new segment I'm calling Sparring with Serena. It's a working title. It might stay, it might not stay. Anyway, for the meantime, let's do some quick news. So soldiers and police were struggling to restore order in parts of South Africa last week, as police said the number of people killed in days of protests and looting have risen to at least 72 in some of the worst violence the country has seen in years. Protests erupted last week as former South African President Jacob Zuma, 79, turned himself into authorities to serve a 15-month jail term for contempt of court. He had refused to appear at an anti-corruption commission to face several allegations, including bribery and fraud, which he has repeatedly denied. Some are calling events over the last week South Africa's darkest hour. For almost a week now, protesters and looters have set malls ablaze and clashed with police, who fired back with rubber bullets and now so overwhelmed that the military has been brought in to back them up. But is it more than a spontaneous triggering of anger brought about by the jail of former President Zuma? Many analysts say that there is a third force sympathetic to the former president at play, and President Ramaphosa has said the violence was pre-planned but has not said who he suspects was behind it. The suggestion is that the riots were intended to further undermine and weaken an already fragile South African economy and, by extension, Mr. Ramaphosa's government. There are two clear and opposing forces in the ANC. One is headed by President Ramaphosa, who his supporters say is slowly rebuilding state institutions and accountability after a decade of corruption and looting during the Zuma administration. And the other is known as the Red Faction, and they're sympathetic and fiercely loyal to the former president, Jacob Zuma, who was a spy master of the ANC inside and outside of South Africa during the years of white minority rule before returning to be president in 1990. Okay, so it's said that a number of individuals inside the ANC and the country's intelligence services with much to lose should accountability and the rule of law take hold and are the ones dramatically behind this violence. But what we do know is that there has been violence and people have died. With the pushback against Ramaphosa's rule comes insecurity, trauma, and fuel and food shortages, and it seems it's always the unemployed and the desperate paying the price. Among those killed in the violence were 10 people who were in a stampede in the township of Soweto, and more than 1,200 others have been arrested in provinces of KwaZulu-Natal, where Zuma is from, and Gauteng, as they say in South Africa. So that's what it is. There's lots of riots. It's still going on, even as we speak. I just updated that last night, and as of last night, it was still going on. And people underestimated the loyalty I think they had to Zuma. Yes, he was very, very corrupt, but he also had people who really, really admired him because during the South African apartheid rule, he was very strong. He was really, anti the white minority rule. So he built up a lot of goodwill. So even though he was corrupt during his time, there are people who have things to gain, who had things to gain when he was president, and they did gain, and they're all loyal to him. Ramaphosa is trying his best. Well, the story is he's trying his best to make sure things come back to normal, less corruption, building back accountability and all of that. And people are trying to undermine that because if that takes hold, then they can't gain from the corruption. But the bottom line is Zuma was arrested, people got angry, and it went overboard as it normally does. South Africa is one country that's usually at peace, but the second they have any kind of rioting at all, something happens, something takes hold, and they really go too far all the time. When they have the xenophobic attacks, it happens. When they have anti-government protests, it happens. Anytime they protest, something happens and really, really goes into loss of life and loss of property. Anyway, that's the news from South Africa this morning. Let's move on. Did you guys hear about Obi Cubana's mom's burial? Anybody heard about that? Nobody? You didn't hear about that in Nigeria? Yeah, okay. There's a guy called Obi Cubana, and he's a businessman in Nigeria, and his mother died. And he's meant to be like a multimillionaire, billionaire, or whatever. And his mom died, and he had this massive burial. But even before the burial, once they heard his mother died and she was getting buried at his village, the whole of Nigeria started packing their suitcases to head towards his village because apparently there's going to be money everywhere. Money on the ground, money from trees, money from the sky. Because the guy is so rich and so wealthy that people thought if they go into his village, that the money was just going to appear. And apparently people have gone, and the burial was insane. Like, he had so much money that girls were leaving their boyfriends to go so they could meet all the rich people who were going to be there. It was a mess. It was a total mess. Anyway, it's all over now. And apparently he put his mom's body he pressed into a diamond. a 50 million naira diamond pendant that he has. But you know how they carbonize the bodies these days? It's a whole thing. If you guys don't know, don't worry your brains. It's too crazy. The story is too crazy. Anyway, that happened over the weekend. Moving on. Did you hear about the Ugandan athlete who went missing in Tokyo? Yes, he went to Tokyo to what's that thing you do when you are trying to get into the races to pre-qualify, and then disappeared. Anyway, he left a note. You were looking for him over the weekend. He left a note. So Ugandan athlete who has gone missing in Tokyo ahead of the Olympic Games had left a note saying his life in the African country of Uganda was too difficult and he wanted to work in Japan, officials have said. Julius Sekitoleko, a 20-year-old weightlifter, failed to qualify for the Games after his arrival in Japan and was due to fly back tomorrow, July 20. But he was last seen at a local station near his delegation's hotel in Japan at 6 a.m. on Friday. The athlete purchased a bullet train ticket to Nagoya, about 200 kilometers away from Tokyo. In the notes, Kitoleko said he did not want to return to Uganda and asked members of his delegation to send his belongings back to his wife in Uganda. City officials first feared he was missing around midday on Friday when they noticed that a COVID-19 test sample had not been submitted to Sekitoleko. Why can't I say that? City official Osamu Muzuguchi said. Local police have been looking for him without success. Sekitoleko completed the men's 56 kilos weightlifting final at the Commonwealth Games aged just 17, and he finished 10th in that contest. Two Ugandan athletes and others from Rwanda and Cameroon previously went missing during the Games, which were held in Australia, and that's been happening whenever a couple of athletes go missing. Two rugby 7 players from Uganda went missing after competing in the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, Scotland in 2014, and were later revealed to have claimed asylum and were playing for the rugby team in Cardiff. The Ugandan delegation was among the first teams to arrive in Japan for the delayed Tokyo Olympics. The team started training in the western Japanese city on July 7 after completing a mandatory quarantine. On their arrival, a member of the delegation was found to be positive for Delta variant. And the opening ceremonies are set for this Friday, where events, there have been lots and lots of protests. But he's missing, and he left a note. And he said send his stuff back to his wife in Uganda because he wants to stay in Tokyo and nobody can find him. He is 20 years old. Why does he even have a wife in the first place? But that's another story. But he's 20 years old, and now everybody knows his name and his face. How is he going to get away with this? Guys, what do you guys think? This is something, isn't it? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to play a song, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to have a very, very special segment called Sparring with Serena. And it's exactly what it says. All right, let us play. I'm going to play For You by Tenny and Davido. Enjoy. I'll see you on the other side. Okay, we're staying in Tokyo for a little while because we have another news story from Tokyo. And 2 Namibian Olympic medal contenders have been ruled ineligible for the women's 400 meters due to naturally high testosterone levels. Namibian sprinters Christine Mboma and Beatrice Masilingi have been ruled ineligible to compete in the women's 400 meters at the Tokyo Olympics due to naturally high testosterone levels, the Namibian National Olympic Committee and Commonwealth Games Association made in a statement last week. Mboma and Masilingi have turned in 4 of the top 5 400-meter times in the world this year, according to World Athletics website. The elevated testosterone levels were detected during medical assessments required by World Athletics. The global governing body requires that female athletes' blood testosterone levels be under 5 nmol to compete in select women's events, including the 400 meters. The 2 18-year-old athletes were ruled ineligible because of the World Athletics policy on athletes with differences of sex development, DSD. World Athletics banned athletes who have elevated blood testosterone levels from competing in women's races from 400 meters to 1 mile in distance in international competition when it introduced the new DSD regulations in 2018. That was just 3 years ago. In order to compete, those athletes must lower their testosterone levels with medication, which World Athletics says ensures fair competition. In 2019, the Court of Arbitration for Sport upheld World Athletics DSD rules when they were challenged by South African runner Caster Semenya. She lost a subsequent appeal and in February took her case to the European Court of Human Rights. Mboma and Masilingi were tested in Italy, where they were training, according to CGA statement. The committee said that neither of the 18-year-old athletes nor their families, coaches, or the Namibian National Olympic Committee were aware of their condition. The committee said that Mboma and Masalingi will still be able to compete in 100 meters and 200 meter events. The group also says it's in close contact with the World Athletics about paving a way forward for the two athletes. We'll analyze all the information and apply it in the best interest of these two young girls, statement reads. We're positive on their future as elite athletes. Wow, that's a big one. What do you guys think? That's really big. It's not their fault. They're born like that with naturally high testosterone. They're not boys, they are girls. They're not trans, they're actual, natural born women. Is that the term? Natal women. But they just have naturally high testosterone. Now, does that affect the fact that they're running faster? Or is that just a pleasant side effect? Or is it the testosterone making them run faster? Because they don't have bigger muscles or anything. They're just good and they're only 18 years old. So to ban them for the Olympics, even though they've qualified, I think that's not fair. I have a different idea for people who are trans, who are trying to compete. I think it's a different conversation to be had. But for people who are actual natal females born and to be told they can't run because they have naturally high testosterone, what do you guys think about that?
I don't think that really makes sense because there are some people that are naturally born with certain type of physiques that are better for a certain sport.
Exactly.
Say swimming, running, whatever it is, like Kenyans.
Okay.
Run fast, there's a whole study on how the ankle is
and they
shaped
grew up
in
in
a certain
elevated
way.
air as well.
Yeah, exactly. So if those ones are fine, why aren't natural testosterone levels?
I think there's a level. I think you can have it high up to a certain level. Apparently, is what they call DSD, saying difference in so if it goes past a certain level, then it starts being unfair to the other athletes. That's what they're saying, who have lower testosterone. What do you think, Landry?
For me personally, I think that if the person have a high testosterone, there's no point for him to compete against the person who don't have, because we know that person with the high testosterone will win. Because I think you said girls, I didn't get properly because I was sitting. About girls, there's girls, they have that power of man. So, I know one, I will just take an example. I know one girl, she used to play football with guys.
Boys.
She's the only girl on the stadium, and she will be the last one standing. I know one, we used to go to the same school. That's something you cannot put her with.
And it's just a shame because they're girls. They're not trans women. They're actual girls. It's such a shame. Anyway, that's the news from Namibia. Hopefully they'll solve it and hopefully they'll have a future in athletics still, because it's not their fault. They can take the medication to lower it perhaps. Anyway, guys, we've come to the end of part 1. We're going to start part 2 really just immediately. Right now. We're going to start part 2 and we will see you on the other side. Hello, we're back to part 2, BB's African News Magazine show on Jambo Radio. We've had a very fun part 1. We had Miles Greenwood on the show from Glasgow Museums. We talked about the riots in South Africa, the missing athlete, the Ugandan athlete in Tokyo. He's still missing, by the way. I'll update you next week if he's been found or not. He left a note. And we also talked about the 2 Namibian athletes who have been banned from the Olympics because of their naturally high testosterone. We're actually talking about that and having a debate about that here as to whether or not they should have been banned. It was a great, lively conversation, but it's now time for part 2. And the new segment is going to be called Sparring with Serena. It's a working title. It's still a working title. So every week we're going to have a topic. We're going to have a wee discussion about it. Nothing too heavy, nothing too battly. We're not going to come to blows or anything. Let's give our opinions on a topic. And then it could be Serena. It could be Landry. It could be whoever's in the studio next door. It could be you calling in, listeners. If you want to join, just call the number. You know the number to call. 0745-990-6822. 0745-990-6822. One more time, 0745-990-6822. Just call in and tell us your opinion about it. Anyway, this week we're talking about skin lightening in Africa and the African diaspora. Is it a pro? Is it a con? We're going to talk about it. We're not going to fight about it, just give our opinions about it. So I came to talk about this because there's a lady, a YouTuber, who talks about skin lightening all the time, Serena. she's lightened her skin. She's dark skinned before. She's now lighter, and she's very open about it. There's no hiding or anything. She's open about it. She gives people tips on how to do it and all of that. And then most times when I think it's a different opinion, because some people think, oh, it's bad. You hate being black if you're lighting your skin. You're a self-hater or anything like that. I'm dark-skinned. I don't lighten my skin. I like being dark. You're light-skinned, obviously naturally light-skinned, so you don't need to do it. So I'm thinking maybe we're more neutral people because we don't practice it, but we can give our opinions on what we think. So personally, I think it's the person's choice. And I don't like it personally, but I don't think if you do it, it means you don't like being black. And the reason I say that is I know a lot of white women who, for example, don't like being dark-haired. Okay, they always have highlights. Some people go blonde, like from teenagers, they go blonde, or they have a nose job or anything like that, and they don't like it, or they tan in the summer. But nobody ever says, "Oh, you hate being white," or "You don't like being white. That's why you have blonde hair," or "You don't like being white," or whatever. Yeah. Nobody ever. Why do we go straight to hate? I know there's a history there, of course, colorism and all of that. Why do we go straight to you hate being black if you lighten your skin? Why can't you just say, this is my aesthetic, I like this aesthetic, I like it? Why not? Why can't we just leave it at that? Why does it have a deeper meaning? What do you think?
Yeah, obviously, the saying you hate being black as the first response is a bit harsh. Yeah. I agree with that. But I mean, yes, it's everybody has the choice to do whatever they want to do with their bodies, obviously. But then I guess my issue with it is like, why do you know why you're doing it? Do you know how you came to the idea of lighter skin is better or blonde hair is better? Because it can feel like a personal preference of like, oh no, I just like reds over blue, like picking colors. Yes. But then is it really picking colors, or is it like
it's your precondition?
A precondition that's like given to you by like your environment, by Western like media, and being bombarded by US movies and all of these things.
But the thing is, I think we see personally, like I went to university when I went to university in Nigeria. I think everybody had this phase, honestly, where everybody was doing it. Yeah. And then some people just grow out of it. What rubbish, it's nonsense. I like my complexion, or I'm fine. But I think everybody had this whole, there was a time when everybody was like face. Rubbing a little cream or something. And then you just kind of like grow out like, what? And then some girls couldn't bleach at all. Like some girls were so naturally dark. The melanin was fixed. No matter how much cream they used, nothing happened. And then they gave up after a while. But just like, I think it was like a fashion. I think in Africa, people think, oh, Africans, they want to be white or whatever. That's why they bleach. I just think it's fashion. Honestly, I think it's a fashion that comes and goes. In the 80s, there was this bleaching thing, and then it went away, and then now it's like the new glutathione things. I just think it's fashion. I don't think it's as deep as you don't want to be black or you hate being black. Because the same people who are bleaching love their language, eat their own natural and traditional foods, and speak their language in the house, and do all the Kenyan or other African cultural things. So, but if they wanted to be white, they would bleach and, eat only European food and eat only this and speak a certain, wouldn't they? If you're trying to be white, so to speak, I
don't know. I think there's levels to it.
Okay.
I don't know. There's levels to it because, like, you can easily, love your culture and like love your food and love your music and all those things, but still look up to, exact like US movies and be like, how I want to look like them, And it's like because we're bombarded by all of that imagery. So I don't know. I think there might be levels to it. It's not necessarily one or the other.
We were more easier on women in Africa. Like, for example, how here in the West, it's changing. But those times you have to be slim. You have to be slim. Not in the black community for the most part. Yeah. The minority community. In the mainstream was you have to be slim. But in Africa, we had this whole, if you're a bit chubby, it's nice, it's cool. The guys, most African men give you a long leeway before, I said, oh, maybe not that. But generally, the chubbier, the yummier, the, whatever, no problem. There's a lot of leeway. So when it comes to skin as well, I know some men they like, but most men in Africa, I don't think they care. Landry, I'm going to come to you, but I don't think they care that much about whether you're fair or dark. I think it's a very American Western thing of, oh, the fair, the light skin. You know how the black Americans go, oh, the light skinned girl, this, they have the whole colorism thing. I think we have colorism, but we don't take it as seriously. It doesn't stop you from achieving things as much. I don't know. What do you think? I don't know.
I don't know. I think it depends. I wouldn't necessarily call it leeway because it's just it's it's different beauty standards. It's different countries, different beauty standards. Because you know, yes, maybe how can I say? See, in Italy, for example, it's like, oh, you need to be skinnier. You need, your thighs shouldn't touch.
Oh,
and
Lord.
then you'd go to Kenya. It's like you need to eat more.
Yes. Exactly.
You're too skinny.
Yes.
So it's like there's an issue on both ends. Like with just generalized beauty standards, it's not. I wouldn't necessarily call it a leeway.
Why? The question I keep asking is, why are we harder on Black women or Black people who lighten their skin, but not as hard on white people who want to be blonde? Like some white women, you will never see their natural hair color. Never. Never. From the moment they go blonde, that's them. They're blonde. Or, those who tan in the summertime, they don't want to be fair at all. They want to be tan. Why don't we accuse them of not liking their race based on those aesthetic choices? But we go straight to the race thing when it comes to, oh, you want to be Black, you want to be fair, you want to be this. Like we said, there's colors, but I think we can just say, you know what? That's her thing. That's her phase. Why not?
I think we're also like, we are getting there to a place where we are accusing, fake tanning and tanning and all of those things. In terms of like, oh, you're trying to be this other person. So,
I think my problem with it is if it makes you look better. I know better. What does better mean, right? What does better mean? But I remember I was scrolling through one of this plastic surgery, and I don't like plastic surgery. And like, you don't need to do your nose. You don't need to do that. You don't need to do your tummy. Whatever. You're just risking your life. And I was scrolling. I was like, oh my god. I'm like, they don't need. And then I saw a before and after of someone who had a nose job, and believe me, Serena, the nose looked better after the surgery. Like the nose is really big and
I
hooked.
believe that.
And I was like, ooh, this one, because I've been saying, oh, you don't need to do this person. I was like, she actually looks better. So if you do it and you look better than before, but if you find a beautiful Black, because I think, oh, my niece, for example, Moya, she's dark skin, she's gorgeous. If she ever lightened that skin, I will die. Like she has the most beautiful dark skin, and I have many girls like that, just gorgeous. They walk in the room, and, oh my god! And if they lighten their skin, I think to me that's like, why would you do that? But maybe some people who think I'm in the middle. If I looked a bit lighter, I might be better. Do you think there's ever a reason?
I think it really goes to everybody can do what they want as long as you know why you're doing it. Like you actually know why you're doing it and why you have that thought of, I need to bleach, I need to lighten my skin, I need to,
It's just a hassle for me. I think it's a lot of hassle. Like, because you have to upkeep it, everything. Who has that kind of time? Like,
exactly.
People are very. But I just think we should just leave people alone. Like, I see the comments all the time: self-hating, 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 self-hating. Why must it be self-hating? It could just be, I like being a bit lighter. I don't know. Landry, what do you think about skin lightening? This is a two-part to the question. Skin lightening, is it right or wrong? And also the second is, do people who skin lighten, do we have to say, oh, it's because you don't like being Black? Or do they maybe just like the look? You know how you have some people like pink lipstick, some people like to do the nails. Some people have a certain look they like. Why can't they just be, oh, I like this look? Why do we have to accuse them, oh, you don't like to be Black? Number one. Number two, what do you think of skin lightening in general?
Me personally, I'm not for that. I'm not okay with that. And what I would say, I think about that, those person doing that, I don't know if maybe they think that their skin is something, because there is so many people, it's just because they will see someone lighter, look lighter, you say, well, what do you use? They don't even have no reason. Yes. That's the first question they will ask. They don't even know if it's just, natural. That can be the climate. So the first question they will ask you is like, what oil do you use? They think like, no, it's just, but there's some people that can be natural. That's what I think I know, because I know someone. So the thing is, and those majority girls, that start for girls, but me, I can see man's inside that.
That's such a weird, when men do it, I think that's so
I can
weird.
see man end, but it's not something, because if you miss, your skin is damaged.
Yeah. But do you think, Serena, do you think colorism has to do with maybe the way attractiveness or dating? Because you say, some people say the 4 dark girls and there's a fair girl, the guys who go for the fair girl. I've never experienced that because I was in school with different kinds of black people, and there's always a pretty girl. But I know in this side of the world, the light skin thing is maybe more important because we're a minority or whatever. But do you think that contributes to it? They don't want to be fair because they don't feel like they're more attractive, or do you think it's just an aesthetic thing?
Well, I guess so. Like if they're trying to follow a certain beauty standard, I guess that's also, part of the messed up side of society.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be a reason. It just falls into the following that beauty standard the same way they do in some Asian countries, with surgery and everything. It's the same thing.
Yeah. I don't know. I just feel like there's a middle ground between you hate being black and, I'm trying to be white, or is a European beauty standard. It could just be my personal beauty standard. I'm not saying I personally would bleach, but I feel like if you wanted to lighten a little bit, why do you have to say the person hates being black? Anyway, so that's basically that's what do you think, listeners? What do you think about this topic? Do you think skin lightening is fine? Do you think it's a bad thing? Do you think it's a stigma thing? Do you think it should be hidden? You should be open about it? Or do you think if you lighten your skin and you're black, it means you hate being black? Or do you think anybody should just be able to make a choice? I want to be lighter. I want to lighten my skin. No big deal. It's the way I look, the way I like to look. Or do you think even that thought, like Serena said, that thought of that's the way I like to look could be actually ingrained from what you see in media, what you're consuming in media, and you think lighter skin is better? What do you think? Anyway, we are going to play a song now. Let's take all our minds off this really, really, controversial topic. I would like to hear from you at the end of it, though. If you have any calls, you want to have any suggestions or opinions about this particular topic, please call 0745-990-6822. Would love to hear from you. But in the meantime, here is Davido's ode to his beautiful, beautiful ex-girlfriend, Chioma. This is 1 Milli by Davido. Hello? Hello, we have a caller on the line.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear us?
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you. Can you hear us? I think we lost that caller. Want to play that music? I think we lost that caller. She might call us back. Okay, here we go again.
Hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear us?
Oh, I can't hear anything.
Oh,
I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, I can't. I can hear you
Hello?
very clearly. I can hear you very, very clearly.
Okay. Okay, you can hear me.
Yes.
I think I'll just...
Can you hear? Can you hear?
So I don't know if I shall start speaking.
Yes.
But I just wanted to contribute to the discussion that for me, growing up, there was someone in my family very close to me who made me feel I wasn't pretty enough because I was super dark, and I'm still super dark-skinned.
Okay.
And I started using a cream to lighten my skin. Not that I believed the person, but I just thought, okay, maybe if I was light-skinned, I will be prettier. Am I okay to go on?
Yes, please. Yes,
Anyway,
please.
it wasn't until my father noticed that I started getting lighter
Yes.
that my father said, "What are you doing? How come you're getting lighter?" And I told him this conversation I had with this person.
Yes.
And he said, "No way, stop it. Your skin is getting lighter. Your knuckles are still dark. This is not beauty. Just leave your skin the way it is." And I believed him, and thank God for that sort of strong male role model who made me feel like I didn't need to lighten my skin to be pretty.
Yes.
And so I stopped, and I haven't looked back. I've never tried it again.
Fantastic.
So I think it's really rooted in people's self-esteem if they are made to feel ugly because they are dark-skinned. And it's not just in Africa. I've had friends from India or Pakistan who have the same issue. The lighter-skinned citizens of those countries are considered more beautiful than the darker-skinned ones. And I think, again, it's to do with what Serena said about what Western idea of beauty is. So it's not unconnected with that at all. So I think we should discourage it. And not to mention that a lot of these products are damaging to the skin.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that's my take on it.
Thank you so much.
So
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Moji. All right, guys. That was Moji from Lincoln. Thank you for her call. And she talked about, the fact that she was made to feel less than for her skin color. But I think that is, and her father had to talk her out of it. So thank God for strong male role models, people who are there for tell us, no, you're beautiful as you are. And I think dark-skinned women are gorgeous, 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 gorgeous. Not everybody in the whole world is gorgeous. But people, if you're gorgeous for being beautiful, not because of your skin. You can be light-skinned and not be that beautiful. You can be dark-skinned and be beautiful. So why should one equate the other? It should be just as is. But I think if your aesthetic is it, I still think people have a right to choose, though. But thank you, Moji, for your call. Anybody else who wants to call, please do not hesitate. 0745-990-6822. 0745-990-6822. All right, we're going to move on now. We're going to finish out our song. We were playing 1 Milli, and we're going to do our African Spotlight. All right, we're not going to finish out 1 Milli. We're going to go straight into the African Spotlight. All right. So every week we focus on a good news story from the diaspora or from the continent and someone doing amazing things in the community. Well, this week our spotlight is a 4-for-1. A 4-for-1. We're shining our light on 4 incredible women on the African continent today, and they're the 4 women, the only 4 women who are chief justices in Africa. Well, in Africa, few women have been presidents. Even fewer have occupied the position of chief justice. And gender equality in positions of influence and power have been widely discussed in Africa, where a lot of the time, women play minor roles in all the major sectors, including politics. This trend seems to be changing, though, as countries like Ethiopia and Rwanda are forming gender-based governments, giving women more representation. But in spite of the efforts of these 2 countries, more remains to be done in the other 52 recognized states on the continent towards achieving gender-balanced systems. So why don't we help that forward by bringing to the fore, and why don't we meet the current female chief justices in Africa who are successfully upholding justice and democracy in their respective countries? There are only 4 of them, by the way. 4 out of 56 countries. Just think about it. So number 1, in Ghana, we have Sophia Akufo. Sophia Abena Akufo is the current Chief Justice of Ghana, succeeding Georgiana Theodora Wood. She's been a judge of the Supreme Court of Ghana since 1995, appointed to the Supreme Court by the former President Jerry Rawlings in 1995. On January 22, 2006, she was elected one of the first judges of the African Court on Human and People's Rights during the 11th AU Summit in Egypt. Akufo was nominated as Chief Justice on May 11, 2017 by Nana Akufo-Addo, the President of Ghana, under whom she trained as a lawyer. She was extensively questioned by the parliaments, confirmed and sworn in on June 19, 2017 as the 13th and second successive female Chief Justice of the Republic of Ghana. All right, moving on, we are going to Seychelles, depending on how you call it, and we're talking about Matilda Twomey. Matilda Twomey is the first female judge in the history of Seychelles and the first female chief justice of the island country. In April 2011, she made history as the first female judge of the country after she was sworn in as a non-resident judge of the Seychelles Court of Appeal. And on August 18, 2015, she achieved another feat by being the first woman to be appointed chief judge of the Supreme Court of Seychelles after she was sworn in by the State House. Her appointment to the office made her the 3rd Seychellois to occupy the position in the history of a country that previously hired judges of different countries on a contract basis. All right, now we're going to Ethiopia, and we're meeting Miaza Ashenafi. A prominent women's rights activist, Ashenafi is one of Ethiopia's most seasoned lawyers and the founder of the Ethiopian Women's Lawyers Association, having served as High Court judge between 1989 and 1992. Miaza is well known for her philanthropy and leadership, and she has won awards including the African Leadership Prize and Grassroots Ethiopian Women of Substance Africa Prize. She became a Hunger Project Award laureate in 2013 and was also nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize later in 2005. She was appointed by the Federal Parliamentary Assembly as President of the Federal Supreme Court of Ethiopia in November 2018. And finally, in Lesotho, we have Maseforo Mahase. She is the acting Chief Justice of Lesotho, having been appointed in 2018. Mahase, a High Court judge and now acting Chief Justice, was recently given a standing ovation after she presented a report to the Africa region of the International Association of Judges meeting in Cape Town in early 2019 on the challenges experienced by her colleagues in that country. Is that not amazing, guys? 4 Chief Justices. It's incredible what they've achieved, but the fact that we only have 4 on the whole continent. That's nuts, isn't it? But we need more. But hats off to these 4 incredible women. They've put in the work for years and years and years, and they are the number 1 judges in each of their countries: Lesotho, Seychelles, Ethiopia, and Ghana. We need to have more countries on that list, people. So the questions for the week are, why only 4 so far? Why only 4 in Africa so far? Number 1. And number 2, what can be done? What can we do? Do we just go and say it's going to be gender-based right off the bat, or do people have to be actually be appointed based on merit? And if we do that, how long is it going to take to have more than 4? Okay, so call or message us with your comments, opinions, and suggestions on the Jambo Radio Facebook page, or you can, of course, send us a message on WhatsApp, and you know the number, 0745-990-6822, 0745-990-6822. And while we wait for your calls, here is a song celebrating Africa itself, and we played it last week. We're going to play it again because Sal Sultan never dies, never gets old. This is honoring the late great Kefi and the late great Sound Sultan. This is Ebruvio, the remix, talking about Africa, by Kefi and Sound Sultan. Enjoy. All right, we are back. That was Ebruvio remix by Kefi featuring Sound Sultan. They are both late, they're both gone, but they will always be great. And that's the thing, when you create something, art, any kind of work, any kind of creation, you could leave this earth, but your work remains, your art remains in perpetuity. And that's what's happened with this song, Ebruvio remix by Kefi and Sound Sultan. Is going to be here forever. Thank you so much to both of them. May they both rest in peace. All right, let's do some announcements. Let's recap the questions and then we'll come back into some announcements. So our question was, there are 4 female chief justices in Africa right now, and there are 56 African countries. So why do we have only 4 so far, and what can be done? We're very proud of them. Kudos to them and those countries, Ghana, Lesotho, Seychelles, and Ethiopia, for appointing female chief justices, but 4 is far too small a number for that bigger continent. So what can be done? Let's hear from you. The studio line, by the way, is 07542 002 891. Once again, that's 07542 002 891. You can call the studio directly or send us a message on the WhatsApp number, which you know, which is 0745 990 6822, 0745 990 6822. So just do that, call us, and just engage with us. We are here. We are right here. Okay, some announcements now. Guys, we have good news. Jambo Radio is launching its studio this weekend, this Saturday. Scotland's only radio station for people of African and Caribbean heritage launches its first visual studio in Renfrewshire. Yes, Jambo Radio will launch its first visual broadcast studio at 3 p.m. on Saturday, 24th of July, 2021. And it's located in Glasgow Airport Business Park with a keynote speech by Scotland's first Black professor, Sir Jeff Palmer, and Chancellor of Watt University in Edinburgh. And we also have Deborah Kayembe, the first person of color to be elected rector of the University of Edinburgh. So join us in spirit, join us in person if you can. We'll be here launching that studio on the 24th of July, this Saturday at 3 p.m. Give me a bump for that, please, Landry. That is great news. Landry never has his bumps ready. One day he'll get there. He'll get there. All right, moving on. Breathing Space is offering a free confidential phone and web-based service for people experiencing low mood, depression, or anxiety. Please call 0800-838587. That's 0800-838587. Do not hesitate, please. Your mental well-being is very important. And also, if you're listening to us and fancy an Afrobeat song to be played for you, please feel free to request a song on www.jamboradio.co.uk and click on request. There you can request a song and from what time the song will be played for your enjoyment. And all this cannot be, will not be, would never be if we didn't have wonderful, wonderful people at the Heritage Lottery Fund funding us, funding our studio, funding our, our project, and all the lottery players, national lottery players, people who buy lottery tickets every week. Thank you so much, because of you playing the lottery every week, all these wonderful, wonderful projects can get to be. So please keep playing the lottery every week. It could be you. It could be you. Thank you to the Heritage Lottery Fund as well. Okay, now it's time for our Have You Heard segment. Still waiting for your calls, though. If you have anything, any opinions about the story about the Chief Justices, the African Spotlight story, we're here to hear you out. So just call the studio. Don't hesitate. We're here live. Call us. In the meantime, we're going to have our Have You Heard segment. Each week, we share an interesting development, story, or event from the diaspora. Well, this week we're asking, have you heard about the anonymous donation to a Black organization in the U.S. from a donor who found out their ancestor was a slave owner? No? All right, let's find out more about it. So, an anonymous person has made a 6-figure donation as reparations payment to a Black nonprofit organization in Louisville after learning that their great-grandfather was a slave owner. According to the Louisville Courier-Journal, the recipients of the check, changed today, changed tomorrow, disclosed the donation during a press conference on Monday. It's a blessing for us, but definitely owed, founder of the nonprofit Taylor Ryan told the press. The deputy director of the nonprofit, Nancy Grace Croney, also claimed that her team initially thought they were being scammed when they were contacted about the donation. That, however, changed when it dawned on them that the donation was actually real. So the initial emotion was like, oh, this isn't real. But once it was real, we knew we had to act on it. We knew that as disruptors and change makers, we had to challenge other corporations, foundations, and individuals to really pay reparations back. Crony said to really redirect those dollars and redistribute wealth to begin to fix inequalities in this country and right here in our backyard in Louisville. In a news release, the organization disclosed that though the donor opted to remain anonymous, the donor issued the check after coming into a lot of wealth on their 25th birthday. So it was a young person. Being aware of how hoarding wealth is a huge contributing factor to inequality in this country, they decided that they should give most of it away, the nonprofit added. Curious to find out where this wealth came from, they investigated their family history, and during that investigation, the donor got to know that their great-grandfather was the owner of 6 enslaved people in Kentucky. The donor also decided to make the donation to a nonprofit because of their inability to locate the descendants of the people their great-grandfather had enslaved, as he did not keep records of their identities. The donor in the release also said their great-grandfather inflicted the trauma and violence of slavery on 6 people for his own monetary gain and did not even bother to record their names. Touch on how the donated funds are going to be spent. Ryan disclosed 40% will be used to assist employees of Change Today, Change Tomorrow, and another 40% will be invested in their community outreach endeavors. And Ryan added the remaining 20% will go to the organization's reserves. Okay. So what do you guys think about that? That's an incredible story, don't you think? It's incredible. So a young person, that's the shocking part of this. The person who donated anonymously was a young person, got to 25 years old, and then their trust happened, and they got all these millions and millions and millions of dollars, and they're like, okay, great. What do I do with this money? I'm going to donate it to good causes. But let me investigate it. How did my people even get this money in the first place? And a little investigation found out that his great-grandfather was a slave owner and had 6 slaves. It must have been a small plantation. But imagine just 6 slaves could generate this much generational wealth. Can you believe that? Imagine those plantations that had hundreds and hundreds of slaves, how much wealth that was generating for the people. And then they decided, you know what, I have to give some of this money away. And they donated. They looked for the people, couldn't find any records. So they found a Black organization to give to and donated all this wealth anonymously. How classy is that? You're 25 years old. Not only are you giving money away, you're actually doing it anonymously and trying to repay your ancestors, horrible, horrible actions. Is that not amazing, guys? What do you think? What do you think, Serena? Just quick one. You don't have to
it is amazing.
Is this something you think? Are you surprised that a young person would do that? No, you think you guys? I think young people are more in tune with social issues these days.
Yeah, and I think we've had a similar story a couple of weeks ago, haven't we? With a young girl donating her scholarship.
Yes,
exactly.
Yeah, but she comes from a disenfranchised background.
Yeah, but still, I don't think it's unusual for young people to donate money.
Yeah.
I find that would be
Par for
more
the course.
common. If young people had the money to donate, I feel like it would be more common for young people to donate it than older generations.
Yeah, true. Landry, do you think so? The same?
I just think that conscience don't have age. So even a 3 years old can have conscience. So giving something is not, even itself, he felt bad maybe. Depend, we don't know what made him
do it. Yeah, but this generation, so obviously he's the 3rd or 4th generation since slavery to come into money on their and their trust is mature, let's say 25 years old. So his ancestors, his grandfather didn't do it, his great-grandfather didn't do it, his dad didn't do it, or he or she, sorry. Why this generation? So I think it has something to do with this particular generation. I think they're a bit more socially plugged in than other generations, perhaps. Maybe,
but the thing, everyone don't understand the way each other understand their life. Maybe his parents, his grandparents didn't see what he saw from black generations. So maybe he have more affiliation, more partnership, friendship with black people.
Maybe.
And him knows that what been happening before wasn't right.
Yes. Okay. I just think it's a great thing, no matter the age. It's amazing as a young person that did it, but no matter the age, donating, your inheritance to a black organization because you found out that the wealth was gotten through slavery, and looking for a black organization to donate some of that money and repay back. That's a classy move, no matter your age. Thank you so much, the anonymous donor. I wish we knew your name so we could give you more props, but it doesn't matter. Your heart is in the right place. Thank you so much. And here is Igisha by the beautiful Rwandan singer, Butera Knowles. Enjoy. All right, we are back. That was the soothing voice of Butera Knowles. She is Rwandan, and that was Igisha. Now it's time for our favorite and most exciting segment of the show, as always, and that is A Moment in Black History. Landry. It works. He did it. Now you do it one more time, just to make sure. Next time I want it super loud. All right. So today, we've been leading up to this for a very long time. So today we're talking about the Haitian Revolution, okay? What was it? What led to it? What are the repercussions of it? Now, before I begin, please remember that history is messy and sometimes stark. So if descriptions of slavery conditions may trigger you, please be on your guard, okay, everybody? You want to leave the room? If you're sensitive, please leave the room or just turn it down. Or if you're not sensitive and you're ready to learn some history, go for it. Landry is going to leave because he's about to start crying. Sit down and learn. All right, let's begin. So it was January in 1804 that a shocking slave uprising led to the creation of a new nation, Haiti. It was an audacious, epic conflict that would span many years and see the rise of a man who some have dubbed the Black George Washington and the Black Spartacus. So how did it happen, and what became of Haiti's founding fathers? Well, before Haiti, it was Saint-Domingue, a French colony on the Caribbean island of Hispaniola. French pirates began settling in the western part of the island in the 17th century, with France eventually establishing a formal ownership of the region, while Spain retained control of the rest of Hispaniola. What it lacked in size, Saint-Domingue soon made up for in sheer economic might. This sun-soaked slice of a Caribbean island became one of the wealthiest colonies on the planet, thanks to extravagant quantities of sugar and coffee it was exporting. In fact, at one point in the 18th century, Saint-Domingue was supplying well over half of the world's coffee supply. Good news for France, but very bad news for the countless slaves who were brought in from Africa, enslaved people who were brought in from Africa to grow the precious crops. Even by the standards of Atlantic slave trade, the regime in Saint-Domingue was brutal and ruthless. The ravages of smallpox and yellow fever meant many slaves died within a few years of arrival, which meant coldly pragmatic plantation owners decided it made sense to simply work them to death. Punishments were severe, food was inadequate, and slaves were even made to wear muzzles to stop them from eating any of the sugarcane they toiled to cultivate day and night. Things began to change in 1789 with the coming of the French Revolution in France. Suddenly, people back in France were fighting for republican values, for equality and freedom. These ideas were enshrined in the Declaration of Rights of Man, unveiled in France that same year. While slavery was not abolished, there was a new sense of possibility in the air. At the time, the white plantation owners in Saint-Domingue were vastly outnumbered by the legions of slaves. As one French writer of the time put it, The wealthy planters slept at the foot of Vesuvius. And the explosion finally came in 1791, when the slaves finally rebelled against their hated masters in a lethally well-orchestrated uprising. Bands of slaves went from house to house, killing the whites and setting the plantations on fire. Years of pent-up suffering had been unleashed in an inferno of vengeance, with thousands killed and whole swathes of the island utterly destroyed. But this was not the end of the revolution, far from it. The complex politics of the time meant that the colony would be locked in a messy and bloody struggle for many years to come. Whites on the island fought back against the insurgent slaves. As one indignant colonist wrote, "There can be no agriculture in Saint-Domingue without slavery. We did not go to fetch 500,000 savage slaves off the coast of Africa to bring them to the French colony as French citizens." Yet the radical ideals of the French Revolution, along with a gnawing awareness of that France needed the rebel slaves back on her side to keep Saint-Domingue from falling into Spanish or British hands, meant that an accommodation had to be reached. Amid the turmoil rose a charismatic leader, Toussaint Louverture. "I was born a slave, but nature gave me the soul of a free man," he once said. And his story was a miraculous one. Raised on a plantation, he developed a love of reading and learning, achieved his freedom in his early 30s, and actually became a plantation owner himself with his own slaves. While he didn't play a part in the earlier stages of the rebellion, his Machiavellian cunning and iron will led him to rise up as the most persuasive figurehead of the movement. It's telling that he used the language of the French Revolution to rally his men, declaring, "I want liberty and equality to reign in Saint-Domingue." Yet his appeal to the heroic principles of the new France would not save him from a dark fate. France abolished slavery in 1794, a fact which many French people celebrated as proof of their moral superiority over the British. Yet the struggle in Saint-Domingue continued, with Louverture eliminating rivals to eventually establish himself as a virtual dictator in 1801. Some saw him as a hero, working to establish the colony as a place where Africans could work in peace and freedom. Others regarded him as a power-hungry despot in waiting. But time for Louverture was growing short. By this time, Napoleon had taken power in France and was in no mood to nurture this brave new pseudo-state in the Caribbean. He dispatched an army with the secret aim of overturning the new Saint-Domingue regime and re-establishing slavery. Louverture was arrested and brought back to France like a common criminal, where he would die in prison. His lieutenant, a former slave called Jean-Jacques Dessalines, was the man who would finish the revolution by seeing off Napoleon's forces and formally establish a new independent nation, Haiti, in January 1804. The bloodshed would not end there, though, as the vengeful and suspicious Dessalines ordered the wholesale slaughter of whites who remained in the new nation. Thousands of men, women, and children would die in the Haiti massacre of 1804, and Dessalines himself would be assassinated a few years later. It was an ugly, violent epilogue to an achievement unparalleled in human history: the creation of a new country by those who were once enslaved there. All right, guys, that was it. What did you think? So, it's a long story. Next week, we're going to talk about how the mixed race Haitians actually contributed to the revolution, because they were not allowed to vote. And there was a lot of controversy about that. But today, we're going to talk about the fact that people who were enslaved in that nation created their own country. They rebelled and created their own country, the whole island. Number one. Number two, had not been done. It's 1804. Americans did not have their own revolution, their own civil war, and abolish slavery till 1865. So Haiti in 1791, on all the years that led to 1804, did it. First black nation in the Western Hemisphere on its own. Like, the fact that we don't all talk about this every single day is incredible to me, because this is something that had never been done in history. People enslaved on a land uprose and rebelled, practically destroyed their captive enslavers, and created their own country. And Haiti is still paying for it till today, because France says they owe them a lot. All the destruction that was done, all the crops that were destroyed, and all the investment, quote unquote, that France had done on the island. Haiti should still pay them back. They can be independent and all that. So Haiti is burdened by all that debt till today. And that's what stopped them from becoming what they should be, Now people are talking about it and trying to rebel against it and say, no, the debt should be cancelled because we've been over 200 years plus, and they're still being shackled by this debt to France. So if that is completely removed and they get a proper leader, Haiti should be one of the best countries in the Western Hemisphere because it's a complete 100% Black African country out there, and they did it almost 100 years before the Americans and the Brits and all of that. Like, it's just incredible that people do not talk about this all the time. It's an amazing achievement. Anyway, guys, what do you guys think about that? What do you think about, the Haitian Revolution? I mean, it's such a deep topic. Yes, a lot of people were killed in it, and there's a lot of vengeance. But then, how do you have a rebellion without vengeance? And the fact that they had those conditions to put the slaves in during slavery on that island, they were working them to their bone. And they just said, just work them till they get too tired to work, and then they're gone. And that's how it went for years and years and years and years until the rebellion came. Let me know what you think, and I would love to hear from you. So before we go, though, we're going to do our other favorite part of the show, which we do love to do, and that is our African Proverbs. And I do know that Serena and Landry have some amazing ones that they have on their minds. Landry, stop waving at me. They have some amazing proverbs that they're thinking of, and I cannot wait to hear what they have in mind. But before that, I'm going to give you 5 of mine. All right, let's go. We're going to the Maasai in Kenya, and the first one is, the night has ears. The night has ears. All right, Somalia now. The child you sired hasn't sired you. The child you gave birth to didn't give birth to you. Okay? Nigeria now. A doctor who invoked a storm on his people cannot prevent his house from destruction. A doctor who invoked a storm on his people cannot prevent his house from destruction. And Senegal. An intelligent enemy is better than a stupid friend. I like that one. An intelligent enemy is better than a stupid friend. And the last one is from Swana, is a Swana one. And it says, the young bird does not crow until it hears the old ones. Thank you. The young bird does not crow until it hears the old ones. All right. And now we're going to hand over to Serena first. Serena, what's yours this week? And in what language?
Oh, I can't remember it in Kiswahili this week. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But it says, this is a common one.
Mm-hmm.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Okay. There's a will, there's a way. That's a good one. Okay. Mm-hmm. And Landry, what about you?
Yeah, I don't have no proverbs for today.
What? No, unacceptable.
Okay, I'll give you one. I'll give you one. A building of sand falls as you built it.
Oh, yeah, okay. Is that an African one?
Yeah.
It has to be African.
Yeah, it's African.
A building of sand collapses as you build it. Is that in English or in French?
It's in French. It's in English.
Uh-huh.
But in French, I would translate that like... You want me to say in French, actually?
Yeah, sure.
Une construction de sable s'effondre au fur et à mesure que tu le construis.
Okay. So...
Tu l'as construit. Sorry.
A building of sand falls even as you build it. So if you don't base your decision on a solid thing as you're trying to build anything on it, you will find it's just destroying itself. And those are our Proverbs for the week. And now, guys, I have a secret to tell you. We have come to the end of the show for this week. Yes, we have. Yeah, I need a bomb for that. Oh, loud one, finally. Yay! All right, no, I don't want this to end abruptly. Let it flow. Don't end it. Just let it go. All right, so now remember, guys, we are funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund, and that is because you wonderful people out there buy lottery tickets. Please keep buying lottery tickets so this wonderful project can keep going on. Thank you so much to the Heritage Lottery Fund, and thank you to everyone who supports the show. And you know, we're launching the studios this week, this Saturday, 24th of July. This week, at 3 p.m. So join us on the radio, join us in person, join us in spirit. We're going to be doing it on Saturday, this Saturday, 24th of July, launching our beautiful new studios. And if you want a song to be played for you, an Afrobeat song, you want to request one, just go to www.jamboradio.co.uk. Click on request a song, and there you go. You can request your song. And thank you to all our callers that called in today. Thanks to Moji from Lincoln for your lovely contribution. Thank you to Miles Greenwood for being on the show. We had a wonderful time today with Serena and Landry. Thank you so much, Serena, for your wonderful opinions when it comes to skin lightening. And if anybody else out there has anything else to share on all the topics we did today, just send us a WhatsApp message on 074599068822, 074599068822, or you can call the studio number, and our studio number is 07-542-002-891. So you can call directly to the studio on 07-542-002-891. But for now, this is Bibi signing off. I have to go. I hope you've enjoyed this one. I'll be back next week with more exciting interviews, spotlights, history, music, and everything in between. Until then, stay proudly African. And to play us out, here is the gorgeous Rima Namakula from Uganda with Tinkula. Bye.
On the World Wide Web, on your mobile phone, and on all social media platforms. Jambo Radio.